Aquaba. Welcome to You Ain't Imagining This. I'm Amma Robin, your sister host, and we are here together at the Umoja Cafe in YAIT Town. So come on in. Come as you are, take what you need. This is a trauma-aware space, and I'm really proud of that because trauma is thrown at us all the time. We see it so often. We experience it quite a lot, and we're just supposed to accept it. Well, it's true. On some level, we do have to, but we have to approach it with care and with consideration, and that's what we do here at YAIT Town. That's why I'm so proud of this trauma-aware space for all of us. This is a place where we don't rush past our experiences and we don't judge ourselves for how we've learned to move through them. So, last week, we shared a story here at the cafe. It was called Before I Finished Speaking. And if you listened, and I really hope you did, you probably recognized that moment in the story. Frankly, many of us live with moments like that every single day. Actually, I know I do. And that's where something small happens on the surface, but something much deeper is going on underneath. I could tell you stories about that. I guess I just did. But we have more stories to come. And I think you could tell me stories about that as well. So today, we're not moving on from that moment yet. We're staying with it. We're slowing it down just enough to see what actually happened in that room and what actually happened inside of us. Because here in YAIT Town, we move through three things: naming, restoring, and imagining. And today, we're focused on the first step, naming. Naming what we experienced, naming what we learned, naming how we've been moving, all without judgment. So if this space resonates with you, please take a moment to like, share, or leave a comment, because there is someone else right now living that same moment, and this might help them name it too. All right, let's sit with this together. Let's begin our Espresso Talk. Asante Sana, I'm so glad we're here in the Umoja Cafe having an espresso so that we can discuss what happened in that room. Well, last week, we sat in that room together. It was a small moment, and a sentence was interrupted. What happened then? Nothing. Everything simply moved on. And if you're honest, if I'm honest, we have probably been in that moment before. When we're talking and then someone just breaks right in and talks over us, and everyone turns their attention and their energy to them. You, then me, we disappear. But really, I know it may sound dramatic, but nothing dramatic actually happened. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody stopped the meeting. Nobody said anything outright. But let's be honest. We got to be truthful here. Something did happen. A voice overlapped hers. A moment shifted, and somehow she was no longer in it in the same way. And the part that matters isn't just what happened out loud. It's what happened inside the moment, how quickly the adjustment happened. We could see it before the meeting even started, and she was planning for that. When she chose where to sit, not too far back, not too far forward, not too close to the front. Somewhere that said, I belong, without having to say it out loud. And then again, in that moment, when she started to speak, when she said, I think we might want to look at how this affects, and then bam, that's when it happened, when the other voice came in. She didn't stop abruptly. She softened, dropped a half a level, and let the moment go. Let's name that clearly. That adjustment, that split-second shift where she stopped, softened, or stepped back, wasn't random. That is internalization. And before we go further, I want to ground us in how we work here so that you know how things work in YAIT Town and that you ain't imagining this. We move through three things: the naming, the restoring, and imagining. And last week in the story, before I finished speaking, we began with naming. That has to start there. And today we're still in that first step. We are naming what happened in that room clearly, directly, and I think most importantly, without judgment. So let's define this in a way that's real and usable. Internalization is what happens when something that was once outside of us, something we were taught, shown, or repeatedly experienced, moves inside of us. And it begins to guide how it affects how we think and how we feel and how we move without us having to consciously decide. It becomes automatic. It becomes embodied. It becomes what feels like just how I am. But it didn't start that way. No, internalization is not the first step. The first step is socialization. Now, that's the process, and I don't want to get too technical, but we got to use some terms. We're naming, remember? Socialization is the process of learning how to exist in a particular environment. It's how we are taught, directly and indirectly, what is acceptable, what is rewarded, what is risky, and what's required. But for many of us, especially as Black folks, this is not just general socialization. This is racial socialization. Now, that's a little bit different. It's a subset of socialization which everybody goes through. But racial socialization is how we learn to read, interpret, and respond to race and racial incidents in real time. It teaches us, often very early in life, how to read a room, how to sense tension, how to recognize when something might escalate, how to protect ourselves, how to stay in the room. You could see racial socialization at work in the story too. I saw it in how she read the room before she ever spoke, in how she managed her tone, the tone policing, and how she waited for the right opening. None of that was accidental. That was learned. And in that moment, when she was interrupted, her response wasn't just about communication. It was a rapid read of the room. Is this a moment to continue or a moment to adjust? Will this stay manageable or could it shift into something else? Those are all questions that she asked herself in the blink of an eye. Psychologist Howard Stevenson describes this as part of racial socialization, learning how to judge whether a moment is something we can navigate or something that could carry emotional or relational consequences. A manageable moment or something that could become heavier. And sometimes it feels like both at the same time. I think we all know this. This is not unfamiliar. It's basically called reading the room. But the technical term, thanks to Dr. Howard Stevenson, is racial literacy. The ability to read what's happening quickly, accurately, and often under pressure, and definitely in real time. And that is not a weakness. That is a skill. It's a skill that every Black person from being a child to through adulthood develops and develops quickly. But when that skill gets repeated enough, and it does get repeated a lot, we begin to internalize it. Internalization is when those external racial rules, patterns, and expectations move inside of us, and they begin to regulate us from within. The system doesn't have to keep telling us. It doesn't have to correct us every time. Yet the system then, it's all in motion already. Because we begin to anticipate and we begin to adjust and we begin to manage ourselves in advance. You could see that clearly in the moment she chooses not to come back in. She considered it. I was starting to say earlier, and then she stops. Or she stopped herself before even voicing those words. But before the words were fully formed, the calculation had already happened. Stay where it's working. Don't shift the room. Just don't. And she let it pass, automatically, quietly, and efficiently. That moment where she stopped speaking didn't start in that meeting. It started long before. This is how socialization becomes internalization. Some of it is obvious. What we're told directly, what we're corrected on, when we're praised or rewarded. And some of it is absorbed in ways we don't even register at the time. It's like how children learn from other children, watching, listening, adjusting. As Black people, this learning often happens in environments where we are not the default. Let's just say it because we're naming, in predominantly white spaces, where we are watched differently, heard differently, viewed differently, responded to differently. So we learn, most of the time, very early on, how to read the room. Relearn what feels safe, what keeps things smooth, what avoids tension, what allows us to stay in the room. And the truth is, I'm going to be honest, it works. And we have to say that clearly without hesitation, because these are not mistakes. These are strategies. Strategies for safety, for belonging, for access, for success. This is not dysfunction. This is adaptation. Ooh, so many words today. Sometimes stepping back keeps you in the room. Sometimes adjusting your tone, or as my grandmother used to say, holding your tongue, keeps things from escalating. Sometimes not pushing the moment allows you to stay safe. And that matters. Because if we don't say that part, this conversation then becomes a judgment. And that's not what we're doing here. We're not judging the person in that room. We're not judging ourselves. And we are not pathologizing this. There is nothing inherently wrong with you for having learned how to survive. We're naming what's happening. Naming is our first tool, and once we name it, we can see it. And then we can make decisions about it. We can make choices. There's this great quote from Dr. Carter G. Woodson that speaks directly to this. He says, when you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. He will go in the back door on his own. And if there is no back door, he will make one. That is internalization. It's the movement from external control to internal self-regulation. And not because the person is weak, not because something is wrong with them or us, but because we have learned how to survive. And we have to hold both truths at the same time. Sometimes going to the back door means you get to stay in the building. Sometimes it means you remain safe. Sometimes it means you get access. And sometimes that is what is necessary. But naming it allows us to see it, to recognize, look, I'm going in the back door. That awareness is everything. I'm really big on awareness because I do believe it's everything. Everything starts with awareness. Because without awareness, it just feels like this is just how I am, or this is just how things are. But it's not how you are, and it's not how things are. It's not what we have to accept. It's what we have learned. It's what we have absorbed. It's what we have internalized. And the hardest part is, most of this happens so fast. Yes, it happens so fast. And so it doesn't feel like a decision. It just feels like what happened. It feels natural. But it is learned. And once we start to notice it, once we can name it as internalization, something else begins to open up. Not a big change, not a perfect response, not, I'm never doing that again, just a small question. What else is possible in this moment? What else could be possible in this moment? Not instead of what you've learned, not rejecting it, not abandoning the strategies that have protected us, but right alongside it. Because even in the same room, there can be more than one way to move and to operate. There can be more than one choice available. And next time, we're going to return to that room. Next week, that's right, we are going back. And we're going back to that same moment. And just see what changes. But for now, just notice your own moments this week. As I said, I know we all have them, maybe on a daily basis. Notice the quick ones and the small ones and the ones that seem like nothing. And notice, without judgment, I'm serious about that, without judgment, how you move and what choices you make and what you feel is possible. That is the work of naming. I am going to meet you next week at the Emoji Cafe. Yes, in this same spot, aisle by the Espresso. And if this felt familiar, please share it with someone who would understand without explanation. And you ain't imagining this. Well, fam, I have finished my espresso. So maybe this is a good time to start winding it down. We have covered a lot today, haven't we? We've named racial socialization, racial literacy, reading the room, and internalization. There have been lots of names, but they're more than just that. They are what we live with and what we use every day, most of the time without even thinking about it. We use it for survival, for belonging, for access for ourselves and for our family and our friends. So this week, I'm going to just pose a gentle challenge. This week, just notice your moments. The quick ones, the small ones, and the ones that seem like nothing, but stay with you a little longer than you would have expected. Notice when you pause. Notice when you adjust. Notice when something shifts inside of you before you even have time to think about it. And as you notice, stay with yourself. No judging, no correction, just awareness. Because, as I said, that's where all of this begins. Here in YAIT Town, we start with naming. And once we can see clearly, we can begin to move differently. We can make choices, not by forcing it, not by fixing ourselves, but by giving ourselves more room. Next time, as I said, we're going to return to that same room, same moment, and we're just not going to name it. We're going to begin to restore, to explore what it means to stay with ourselves in that moment and what becomes possible when we do. And from there, we'll start to imagine. Oh, this is going to be an amazing journey. It's not a perfect world. We're going to look at a different way of moving through the world that we're in. And we're not just aiming for a little different or a little bit better, but completely different from our current experiences. So, I hope you're ready to expand your mind and your world. Until then, take care of yourself in your moments. Now, a special asante sana, a special thank you to Dr. Howard Stevenson, the brilliant psychologist who is diving deep into examining racial literacy and generously sharing this information with us. You can find a link to his amazing book, Racial Literacy in Schools, in the show notes. And I can vouch that there is a powerful statement and powerful content on every single page of that book. And if this content and episode stayed with you, and I really hope it did, please share it with someone who might need it too. Because this is how we find each other, how we support each other, and how we remind each other of our power. I'm Amma Robin in YAIT Town, where we are naming, restoring, and imagining. I'll see you next week right here at the Emoji Cafe. And as always, remember, you ain't imagining this. One love, my fam.